It's the Redbird Reboot Podcast. Are you ready to get rebooted, Cardinals fans? He settles down, at least in the zone, and does not stop running.
Blake Murphy.
This is the identity for the Arizona Cardinals.
The run defense is just horrendous, and it's been horrendous for the Cardinals for a long time.
And Marcos Labrada.
He's going to bring over his philosophy. It should make it better.
Present the hottest NFL podcast from the country's hottest state.
He should be turning around the logo.
Actually, some breaking news we can cover here. This popped up just about, 6 minutes ago.
It's Redbird Reboot.
Arizona Cardinals fans, welcome into the Redbird Reboot. At least here you've got me, Blake Murphy 7, as your host, along with the co-host Marcos Labrada. We are here to talk Arizona Cardinals entering Week 3 with a 1-1 record following a close game against the Bills, following a blowout win over the Los Angeles Rams. There's been some interesting injuries on both sides, and the Lions are an interesting spot coming into this game with a similar 1-1 record. Arizona has had a tough time beating Jared Goff, a tough time with the Lions. Before we get into our game preview with all of that entails, Marcos, how are you doing and how are you feeling about the Cardinals entering in to Week 3 of the 2024 season?
I'm feeling a lot more positive than I would have if they would have lost that game. I picked against them for a reason. I just didn't feel like unless they proved to me that they could beat the Rams, that they would be able to. And seeing as the past games, it's just been like a situation where it doesn't matter who you throw out there. It seems like the Rams have our number, but this time it was so great, and it was such a great win to be able to not only put a statement on the NFC West, but there's a lot of people that are taking notice of the Cardinals, and finally they're giving them some recognition, even though like Kyler Murray did not win the Offensive Player of the Week, and Marvin Harrison Jr. did not win the Rookie Player of the Week. It was given to another rookie from the Jets. It's just that's a sad reality. They're on prime time. They get more views, yet the Cardinals have to somehow get a quarterback to go on a perfect passer rating and put up 41 points, and they still don't get the full recognition. It's just a reality situation. I don't like it. I will say there are two things that I want, like anybody that's listening, any fans out there, there are two people that finally gave Kyler Murray some love. And I think one of them is JT O'Sullivan. He put out a film breakdown on Kyler Murray's game. And also, I believe Kurt Warner also did a study ball session. So that's awesome that they're finally getting some recognition at the very least.
Right. And like we said, that there is some weird lack of recognition in some cases. There was a ground and player, I think it was like a ground and air FedEx Player of the Week that people got to vote on. Instead of Kyler Murray, Alvin Kamara got that role. Then you're like, well, let's see who the best rookie of the week is. And instead of Marvin Harrison Jr. ended up being the likes of Braylon Allen, who is looked pretty good in that secondary running back role with a touchdown. But I think a lot of Cardinals fans have definitely felt like Lions fans have felt like in the past few years of, hey, the team has struggled. There's been not as many people getting some credit. There's been some people who've watched the games and are recognizing that Arizona's offense at least has looked really good so far this year through 2 games. I do think that it is one of those areas of the market being an uphill battle, Marcos, where when you don't have the marquee quarterback, you don't have the marquee playoff wins, and you don't even have the marquee, can we say like coach or quarterback. I think of a team who's struggled in the Los Angeles Chargers. Justin Herbert is kind of always a guy that's out there, and then Jim Harbaugh comes in. There's just a spot where you have to really be one of those teams that shows you can be not just a quick flash in the pan, but show consistency. Now, the Cardinals can show consistency and a close loss against the close loss against the Lions following that win up against the Rams. Then I think a lot of NFL people will say, yeah, this team is definitely legit. Just ball maybe didn't bounce their way. There's others who will just only look at the win-loss record, and I think in that case, a win by the Cardinals could go a long way in cementing the Cardinals as a team to watch for maybe not just the next few weeks, but potentially for the rest of the season. Now, That being said, Cardinals do come into this game against the Lions with some injuries, and they also come in once again as home underdogs. I believe that last week, Arizona, for some sports books, had them as like a 1.5 favorite. It was the first time they'd been favored at home for who knows how long. It's just they've had a lot of home struggles, difficult schedules, lack of Kyler Murray. Going in with this Lions game, they are 3-point underdogs. Right now, the Lions are the favorite. The points total is about 51.5. So you're probably looking at another high scoring game. It's got to be like at least 7 or so touchdowns. And when it comes to as far as for what Vegas is looking at for predicting, the balance is kind of looking at about 230 or so passing yards for Kyler Murray, a little bit more for Jared Goff, a little bit more than 250 passing yards. And then as far as these are being two run heavy offenses, you're looking at the likes of David Montgomery at least getting 50 yards and James Conner also getting probably about 50 to 60 or so rushing yards on the ground. These have been two teams that, Marcos, through this year we have seen have been probably not the strongest as far as their defensive lines have been concerned, but the Lions have been a bit stronger in terms of the run game on the defensive side. Cardinals, however, when you're talking about the pass, defending some of the pass, being able to play the Cardinals, you would say would go into this game as a disadvantage, with the exception that this Lions offense has not looked spectacular to start the season. They've kind of taken a little bit of time to get going as far as slower starts to the game. Their offense just hasn't seemed to be clicking yet. And there's been a couple of Jared Goff turnovers that we can talk about that have played into that too. So you got to say the quarterback advantage has to be within Kyler playing well so far. But in the likes of a Jared Goff, the Cardinals have really not beaten him for the last 7 years or so. He just has always picked their defense apart, and some people have wondered if this could be a get right game for the Lions if they are able to come out pretty early on and be able to make a statement, especially against a depleted Cardinals offensive line and a Cardinals defensive line that doesn't have an Aiden Hutchinson on that spot in the line to be able to rack up some sacks and make some plays.
Yeah, well, that is a situation, obviously, with the offensive line. Calvin Beachum, people are praying that he's out there. And even after like game one, where they were saying that he was the reason why our offense didn't, they didn't operate like they did in the first half and whatnot. Now people are really, really hoping that he is healthy. Calvin Beachum has been a stable on our offensive line, so he's always been somebody that's been called upon whenever we need him to, because he's our swing tackle. And I do believe that there's more, it's pointing towards the direction of him being healthy than it is him not playing. But like, there's people that are worried about that. And I would be worried too, because Aiden Hutchinson doesn't just rush from one side, he rushes from both sides of the line. But if you have him one-on-one with your outside, tackle, or your right tackle, you would think that there would be a situation where they would have maybe like a tight end, like Tip Raymond. They even brought up Tip Raymond as in like an answer to that situation, even though he's a tight end, that they think that he could be good enough to be an offensive lineman, to be able to, possibly just be a permanent chipper on that side of the line of scrimmage. Yeah, people are worried, and I would say that if Kelvin Meacham's out there, I'm just not ultra worried, even though Aiden Hutchinson is still a beast. But even if he's lined up on the left side, I would still worry about Aiden. So I think this offense would be a lot better if Beachum is out there than if he's not.
No question. I think some of what we've seen also was Aiden Hutchinson last week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had 4.5 sacks. Like, he came essentially 1 sack away from breaking the single game sack record for Lions players, which is 5 sacks. That's one of the things that when you talk about having an elite or a top pass rusher, that's something that we haven't seen the Cardinals been able to really have since the like of a Chandler Jones. They had one in Hassan Reddick that they did walk, but a lot of people looked at that time frame and wondered if Reddick was going to be able to make the Cardinals good year in and year out. And what we've at least seen since he's left has been Arizona has not been able to have one of those guys. Now, Hutchinson, for his sake, he was drafted number 2 overall. probably could have been the number 1 pick that year. Came out of the University of Michigan, was pretty close to at least a Watt brother as far as the measurable skills, the college production. And that's something, at least, of course, of when you're talking about that guy matching up with someone who's a backup tackle, there's always going to be an edge that ends up going toward that player. The downside, of course, also is this may not actually end up even being toward a backup tackle. This could be at least getting down the depth chart. So as far as the injury report for week 3 with Arizona, they're a bit more beat up this week. So Kelvin Beachum was added to the injury report probably about Thursday or so. Did not practice at all on Friday. He's questionable. Seemed like something happened either in practice or just wasn't quite there. Greg Dortch has had a hamstring. He's questionable. From what at least I have heard is that he's probably more likely than not to play. But as far as Beachum goes, the Cardinals did end up promoting 2 guys at least from their practice squad at the offensive tackle position. So it's not that you promoted one guy to say, hey, Beachum's going, let's get a guy to back up in there. He also has seen a second guy. So this is Jackson Barton and Charlie Heck, who have both been promoted. To me, that spells that he's probably going to be a true game time decision. Because if you think, yeah, he's going to play and then he doesn't go, you only have 1 tackle, suddenly you're just having to, be unable to actually run a functional offense going out there. If you do end up having a spot where he is good to go, you can just have that guy promoted from the practice squad, keep them as an inactive for the game if he is ready to go when you know ahead of time. As far as it goes, Marcos, with the rest of the players, you got Will Hernandez practiced full, Xavier Thomas practiced full. He would probably take on the Greg Dortch role. I should say Xavier Weaver. Xavier Thomas, at least, was off for, I believe it was a personal reason, but he's back practicing. So you are coming into this game where you're probably going to end up seeing Dante Stills be inactive again. You very well are going to probably see Kelvin Beachum be inactive, which means it's going to be Jackson Barton potentially going out against an Aiden Hutchinson. And as far as for how Cardinals fans can feel, we did get a nice little look at Zaven Collins against a Jackson Barton just from practice this last week. And it does look like he's probably at a spot where this is what happens when you get to 3rd string offensive tackles. You're going to either have to adjust your game plan. Obviously, it's 1 rep. But there's just no question about it that the Cardinals are going to be at a potential disadvantage if they are going to be seeing the Lions pass rusher lineup on that side. So whether you want to call putting in a Tip Ryman as far as 13 personnel, you want to get triple protection where you're able to have on passing downs, your running back goes in and blocks guys. Hutchinson was still getting past some of those triple guys against the Buccaneers that last week. So it is something interesting to see, Marcos, is we talked about how against Von Miller, once Kelvin Beachum came into the game, the Cardinals offense just seemed to stall out. The defense couldn't hold back. I don't think this Lions offense, as it is right now, has found its groove yet. Maybe you catch them early and that's good, but they may not be as good as the Bills offense as far as Cardinals may be able to make some plays. Jared Goff is clearly not Josh Allen, but it does seem like that this is something that Cardinals fans heading into this game. If this is a 3-sack game for Hutchinson, Cardinals are on 3rd down and long a lot because they're not able to run the ball effectively. That's really going to put the Lions in a position where they would have to kind of throw this game versus the Cardinals being able to take it for themselves.
Yeah, I don't like I mentioned so many times before, I don't think that it comes down just to one player on the offensive line that threw off that whole that whole offense and stuff, because there's a lot of moving parts in that situation, and you can also just run to the strong side or you can make the strong side be the left side of the formation, and then you could run you could run the ball that direction. Or if you're running inside zone, your tackles aren't really the focus of that type of run. It's more like duo, which is the double team, and then one person goes off to the second level and whatnot. So with Beachum, and I knew it was going to take him a little bit of time to get adjusted, but there was also some decisions that were made obviously on the field, and people were calling out the play calling. It was just a lot of unfortunate factors. But you're right about the Aiden Hutchinson situation, that even against that Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive line that a lot of people would consider better, mostly because they have Tristan Wirfs as a left tackle now. They would say that their tackle duo is probably a little bit more better and more experienced than our Cardinals tackle
Yes.
room, Hutchinson is still going to get pressure, regardless of even if he's going up against someone like the likes of Tristan Wirfs, because that's why you draft these guys so high, because they'll have their battles with all pro offensive linemen, and only the best of the best are the ones that are going to maintain a zero pressure rate, which is very hard to attain. That's like a perfect game for like tackles, but he's going to get back there one way or another. And if not, of course, he's going to shift to the other side of the offensive line, or they're going to try to make him blitz between that, no, not blitz, pressure between that B gap. So with that, and plus the video we just saw, I want to see more clips, because it's always funny that they take the one where he's off balance. Now, with that being said, his job right there was to try to make him loop and make the pass rush like pretty much loop around him, so that in that instance he can't break to the middle. So I think what they're gonna do is they're just gonna treat him like a traffic cone if he does go out there, and tell him don't give up the middle. It's okay to use their own aggression against them, but like we need you're not that experienced, and obviously you're not a better offensive tackle than the first two people ahead of you. We need you to try to use everything you can to not give up that middle rush. Because if he oversets
Yes.
on the outside and he gets beat in the middle, that's going to spell trouble for Kyler Murray, because that's where you can kill your quarterback essentially. So I think they're just going to tell him, look, don't overset. Make sure you when you do your sets, you don't do a like a pass set. You do more of like an inside protection, so to make sure that linebacker does not beat him in the middle and stuff.
Yeah, no, that's something, at least that interior of the offensive line for Arizona is something that has played well overall this season. The Lions, at least for what it's worth, have a really good offensive line. Frank Ragnow has not looked as great. Kevin Zeitler, I believe, was a guy that they brought in either via, I think it was, if not trade, I think it was at least a little while ago as an offensive guard. But the tackles are something completely different now. Where you're looking at Arizona, we can say that, hey, like, so far looks like Paris Johnson's off to a good start. He's looked like a second year left tackle that could be a franchise cornerstone piece. It's like we've seen what you've wanted to see from him so far, taking the leap in that area. The Lions offensive tackles, on the other hand, it's a little bit different. So this is a quote from the Cardinals linebackers coach Rob Rodriguez saying, "Hey, you put on the one-on-one tape. I almost wanted to take a nap afterwards. I was depressed." And yeah, like that's the case. The Lions have an effective running game. They have David Montgomery, who's very similar in a lot of ways to strong between the tackles runner like James Conner, who can make catches as well. They also have that lightning and explosive combo, which I think some Cardinals fans have wanted to see that from a Trey Benson or even an Amari DiMercado. But really, I think it's the Kyler Murray type of explosivity is the athleticism that makes the most sense for Gibbs. So it is one of those places of where this is kind of a couple of strengths lining up on some weaknesses. We will see how things will play out as well for Arizona, because the Lions have some injuries on that front as well. So the Lions have also have, for entering into week 3, a couple of big players who are questionable. So what sounds like the Terrian Arnold, who had an illness, is going to be looking like ready to go. We'll see about their stud linebacker, Alex Anzalone. He was limited with a concussion. Their guard, Graham Glasgow, who's on the right guard spot, was limited. They did see a couple of guys, Ennis Rakestraw, who I believe I think he's a rookie, if not a second-year player, as a cornerback, didn't practice. But the rest of those guys are probably going to be good to go. So if we see a Terrian Arnold missing, that seems like it'd be great news for someone like a Marvin Harrison Jr., because those are two rookies, top tier first round players with good size, being able to make plays against each other. And Anzalone is a big part as far as with that rush defense. But other than that, it is going to be a spot where it's really going to come down to, can the Cardinals be able to protect Kyler Murray? And also, will they be able to get some pressure on Jared Goff? So going into last week's game, we can take a quick look here at some of the defensive grades for the Lions. And this is where what really stands out, of course, is Aiden Hutchinson for the Lions. Had the highest overall PFF grade at a 90% on defense. Brian Branch, strong safety, who's kind of been maybe not a second Buddha, but at least been a stud safety, being able to come in as some of even their some of not their nickel corner, but being able to be in some of those personnel packages of filling in for the run, being able to stay back, has played super well as well. Now, on the Tampa Bay side, you can see, at least with their pass blocking, The guy who had the weakest grade, just in school, at least for that one, was not their actual starter. So when you're looking at the depth chart for the Buccaneers, they were basically down to, I believe it was their third string offensive lineman last week as well. So normally what you would have, you've got I think it's Luke Gadecki is the normal player they would have in. He was hurt, so it was just a backup left tackle that they were playing with last week. And that's part of what led to the 4.5 sacks of Baker Mayfield. What you did also see, Marcos, and this is where I think the Cardinals could find a bit of an edge. We also saw some turnovers from Jared Goff. And that's one of the things that we have talked about in a large number of Jared Goff games has been when pressure comes up, he makes more mistakes with the football, especially when there's pressure up the middle. He has to reset his feet. And we've seen that this Lions offensive line, they've been able to prevent some outright sacks. But we've also seen at least that if you can get some pressure on Goff, and maybe this is going to be a Nick Rallis, the offensive tackles are great. You're going to have to work on finding these good blitz packages up the middle of the field and making sure that the coverage of some of these weapons like Amon-Ra St. Brown, seeing Jamison Williams had a breakout week in week 1 with that deep speed against the, of course, Rams defense, at least. I think it was week 1. He was the guy who was covered by Tre'Davious White. What happened when Marvin Harrison Jr. played Tre'Davious White? You can kind of get the picture as far as how some of these teams were able to attack the Rams specifically. I think that this is going to be one of those places where when you get through the game, you're going to have to force turnovers from this Lions offense, I think, to be able to be in it, because you can't just be a team that lets the Lions run the ball. You suddenly are one-dimensional passing it, and that allows Aiden Hutchinson to key off on Kyler Murray. You're going to have to, if you're Arizona, find a way to force a Jared Goff turnover or two, or at least be able to kind of pull up some big sacks and kill a few drives.
Yep, that is the name of the game. Is don't allow them to run all over the Cardinals defense. I still am not sure about what I feel about this run, like this run defense, because even against the Los Angeles Rams, there was a couple of gashing like plays by the Rams to be able to get like a few like 10-yard gains or a few like 9-yard gains, and a lot of them were in between the tackles. And we signed Justin Jones and Bilal Nichols to be able to address that, but it also comes down to the linebackers. And I'm okay with Kaiser White as a sign by the Cardinals, but one thing I'm not okay with is that they put him in the Mike position, which means he has to fit the run most of the time. And I just don't see him as that type of a linebacker that's going to be a solution to like stopping the run when it comes to fitting the run, because he seems more like a coverage linebacker than he would be like a run fitter or somebody like that, which is why I keep making that same thing that I'm always going to be saying no matter what. Is like, look, Zaven Collins has had his time with the line in the linebacker room, but I think it takes like more than 1 or 2 years to be able to develop that. Now, he got some pressure in the last game, but it wasn't like top tier pressure where you think you're going to like have him be like a 10 sack guy.
Yeah.
That was mostly coming from somebody like Dennis Gardeck, who, we know he pops when he pops, and we know sometimes he's not the old like every single down. Dennis Gardeck isn't an every down like linebacker like they would want him to be.
Yeah.
But like Zaven Collins is the guy who's getting more snaps than Dennis, and he's not producing that type of pressure that we would want him to justify him keeping him in the outside. So I'm okay with him moving back to the second level. And what I saw from him, as long as run defense is, first of all, he's a big body, so it's hard for a running back to even run him over. Second, he is pretty good at being able to like diagnose where the run could be. He has the speed to be able to run like on a read where he sees clear and he's going to hit that gap. I've seen him fast enough. I've seen him that he's fast enough to be able to keep himself from getting picked off by a guard or a center or a tackle that's pulling and whatnot. The people that are supposed to keep that gap, they're showing that gap open, and then they suddenly just hit him with that block that stops him from being able to get to the running back. I've seen him be able to diagnose that. So why not just if you see a trend of him not getting pressure from his side, just give him those snaps at linebacker and then put Kaiser White in that role again,
Mhm.
where he succeeded back with Philly. Because he had TJ Edwards as the Mike. TJ Edwards is bigger and girthier than Kaiser White is, and there was a
Yeah,
reason why
he
like
got
they
paid more.
kept him
Yeah.
at will. Yeah.
No, I think that's something, of course, at least that's this game is really going to come down to, I think, in a couple of ways. Can you run the ball? So the run game is going to be key because, as we know, the Lions are going to run the ball on the Cardinals because we know that Arizona, they've done pretty well overall as far as when it comes to defensive rushing. The top two teams for rush yards are the Ravens and the Saints. Cardinals ranked within the top 10. Now, some of that I think is you take a look at how week 2 went, where the Rams just had almost no offense, Stafford having the multiple sacks. Like, there is at least a really bad offense that they played that's going to play a part of that. We have also seen, at least as far as receiving goes, they're probably in about the middle of the pack or so. They probably have 448 receiving yards that were given up on the season. Lowest is the Titans at 269, and the highest being the Patriots at about 770. And that's kind of just meaning, hey, like, right now, Cardinals have actually been attacking the run pretty well. It's just they've been thrown on. Some of that is Arizona has gotten a first half lead. Other teams have had to throw the ball to get back in the game. That, I think, is the recipe for success, Marcos, is if you're able to run the ball with this Cardinals team, be able to get up again, like say 17, the defense bends but doesn't break. Maybe they let up a field goal or two. You're up 17-6 going into the half. That's, I think, going to set up the ability for this Cardinals team to potentially work on getting some pressure on the likes of Jared Goff. Now, you did mention Dennis Gardeck, and I did want to highlight a little bit of what we saw from him in his 3 sacks earlier this Rams game, because it's going to be a little bit different. He's not going to go up against a backup left tackle. He's going to be going up, but some of these principles are still going to apply. Here, this play, you can see, at least for those of us watching on our video stream, Gardeck is lining up at least outside of Zaven Collins. You've got Owen Papo, the linebacker, in the middle of the defense. Justin Jones is set up there, and then you've got Xavier Thomas on the outside. That's a very light box. Like, this is a pass rushing box. This is not a run stuffing box. So you're probably talking about some sort of a third and line situation, third and long. White at least takes the running back. They try to chip on the way out. Gardeck at least just is able to get off the snap, doesn't give up after falling, and picks Matthew Stafford up and slams him to the ground. First of 3 sacks that's there on the day. Marcus, we can talk a little bit about this play, but the Cardinals have shown a couple of interesting and funky pass rushing looks when it's come down to it, as far as they blitz in a different way where you're able to see some of their guys are getting way outside as far as the pass rushing game goes, and that allows Dennis Gardeck to kind of get inside for a sack on his second sack of the day against Matthew Stafford. He baits to the outside, switches back, and then gets that inside leverage to be able to bring Stafford down.
Yeah, like just look at the power. Like it's he shades. He's on the outside of a wide 9. He comes back inside, and it's only like about a yard that he steps towards the inside, and then he just takes that inside lane because this number 71, he's so afraid of the speed rush to the outside that he did exactly what I said earlier about our own offensive tackle. He overset.
Yep,
He did that
overset his
because he thought
protections.
he did that because he thought he was going to catch him like
Yeah,
on a speed rush to the outside.
Yep, because he just was caught on a speed rush to the outside. Gardeck running upfield. They tried to chip him. It just didn't end up working. He gets him to the ground, but Gardeck basically crawls, gets back up, and gets to Stafford. So this is how sometimes when you're talking about pass rushers and how defenses and players will adjust, you can actually take advantage of players by baiting them inside and getting them back outside. And the offensive tackle is not good enough to be able to recover. So Gardeck is able to come up with a huge sack. Arizona also does a stunt with Justin Jones. So you got Zaven Collins from each of those. You can see at least, he kind of just pushes at least the left guard that's in that lineup 72. And when Stafford is dropping back, coverage downfield is pretty set. They've just got his own coverage. They've got Kaiser White flashing over to be able to take on the doubling the receivers. Jalen Thompson in the image is looking like he's kind of looking at Ronnie Rivers. Stafford ends up at least with the only way that he could be able to go is he'd have to kind of go whoop like a Kyler Murray and run out of that. They've got a stunt ready on that sack. This is just a good spot by Arizona of just designing a good pass rush as far as taking advantage of, like you said, that outside set. And if the Cardinals on their side of the ball try to overset against an Aiden Hutchinson for the same reason, because you get beat on a speed rush. He can definitely take advantage of you inside, and that's something that Cardinals offensive linemen, it's going to be interesting to see how that's going to play out this week, if it is really their uh, third overall. I should say, sorry, excuse me, the second overall pick against their third string offensive lineman. Let's talk
Yeah,
last with the final sack on Gardeck here, but I was curious, Marcos, if you had any other questions about, or even just comments with, how can Arizona stop this guy from getting to Kyler Murray?
Aiden Hutchinson.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that, like, so on that last play, the running back completely bailed on that pass pro set, because you know that they send him to that side of the formation for a reason, because they were going to have him possibly chip. So if they were expecting an outside like pressure, like a speed rush to the outside, then the running back would have been in prime position to be able to like chip Dennis Gardick and then, obviously release to the flat. The problem with that was that he instead went ahead and blitzed to the inside. So he
Yeah.
blitzed the B gap. At that situation, the running back like kind of just ran to the flat without even checking and releasing first. If he would have checked and released, he probably would have try to run to that B gap and see if he could maybe like slow down Dennis Carter, because at that point you just can slow him down. You can't like get yourself set on a good pass, like a pass protection, like a formation where you have your hips and your butts down, your legs are square, you're gonna go from the bottom up and stuff. You'll get run over once that happens. So right at that point, you could just be a traffic cone and then make it so that Dennis Gardick has to run around you or possibly even like run you over, but at least that saves enough time. And you saw on that clip, what's it called? Matthew Stafford was in route to releasing that ball. That ball would have been completed if not for that situation. I mean, he did it earlier. He did it to Kaiser White on that A gap blitz where he got his leg. You remember seeing that where Goff threw it downfield and the wide receiver like caught it like he was down there somewhere. Well, he caught a part of his leg and Kaiser White lost his balance and got to the ground, and then that gave him enough time. So, like, it was a running back that I would say like kind of failed him on that situation.
Yeah, and some of it too is as far as guys who are open, we can take a look at this is kind of with using the NFL Pro as far as their how they've designed it. When you're taking a look at the sideline view of this play, you've got Cooper Kupp down there at the bottom of the screen, and that's going to be kind of like your go-to guy. They move the tight end across, and this is one of those plays at least where you can see where they're looking to get the ball stretched out to Cooper Kupp in a long distance. You've got a check down route here, so he's reading kind of these defenders, and it's going to long situation. Like this is one of those spots where you got 10 yards to throw. Very clearly, Kupp is the guy he's wanting to go to here. Kaiser White drops into where he's in coverage. Like you said, if he gets about a half second more, he's throwing that ball. Kupp is going to come into the middle of the field and probably make that first down. But Gardeck gets there so fast. And that's something when it comes to offensive line play that is important, because you can always say, hey, like, what was the right thing to do on this play? The answer sometimes is, hey, like, sometimes your guy just gets beat by their guy, or your guy just beats their guy that quick where there's nothing you can really do. You just got to kind of fall on the ball, take a sack, make sure that you're not going to throw that ball and then have it get intercepted on one of those plays as well.
Yeah, look at that. Look at that running back. You could see the helmet move from like right to left. So he's checking the gaps and he just bails right there. I'm like, that was on you. Like you're supposed
I
to be
think
protecting.
that's when it looks like he looks away, at least for the most part. I think he sees right there that he may have to be like the screenplay from that. Stafford, in this case, he's going to Kupp. Like the best play in this actual angle should have honestly been right here. Once you see him in that spot, Stafford's able to come off of Kupp, turn and look. Well, credit to Matthew Stafford as a gunslinger. He's one of those guys who will hang in the pocket, throw the ball, and be able to pick that up. And the Cardinals, at least in this spot, are already beating the Rams in this case on offense. So he's probably feeling like they need a big play. They need to get back in the game. Kupp is about to come open, and he just gets beat. He pulls the ball down as Gardeck comes in. It's a great play, at least by Gardeck, and that's something that the Cardinals are going to have a tougher matchup. It's not going to be that same backup left tackle to play this week. This week, maybe the Cardinals with that situation. The final sack from a Dennis Gardeck we can take a look at here is where Gardeck kind of lines in a strange position where he's essentially in almost a coverage look against the tight end, like he's about ready to run downfield with him. Rams at least have lined up. There's no Kupp. This is a straight up 11 personnel one running back, one tight end, three receivers on the outside. And when he runs, he basically has a tight end that is the guy who's like trying to block him. The right tackle is matched up where he just got nobody in space. He tries to see if he can loop back. Gardeck fights through the one. Stafford's looking down the field, and you can see here, running back is like, hey, look, like, you want to get the ball to me? Well, it's a long way to go for the first down. This is in I think this is 2nd and 1, actually, for the most part. You should be checking it down to the running back. But in 2nd and 1, we saw this with Cliff Kingsbury. We've seen this with Air Raid. Guys will take a shot play in 2nd and 1, knowing you can probably run the ball in 3rd and 1. So they drop back, seeing if they can catch Arizona off guard. Instead of dropping it off to the running back, Matthew Stafford at least kind of steps up a little bit in the pocket, seems to be waiting for someone to come clear. Gardeck fights through the two guys, and then he ends up fumbling the ball. This is just one of those plays of where it's really tough when you're down a lot and trying to come back in the game. You take a shot play. Sometimes you do have to take what the defense is giving you, because this is one of those plays that I think you have to put at least on Matthew Stafford, because Gardeck, at least, the tight end's pushing him outside. There's a pocket for him to step up in. You can see at least that he's still looking for that deep play. He's got a running back who's at least covering him. Gardeck even has a big bull rush on the left tackle. Stafford is at that point just kind of decides he's going to step up in the pocket, see if he can take off. He gets tackled from behind and fumbles the ball. Is just not a good play, at least with Matthew Stafford, when you're holding on to the ball that long. Even if you're saying, hey, like, guys need to uncover, a lot of times in the NFL, you just want to be able to make sure that, hey, it's better for you to kind of survive, stay alive, and live to fight another down, especially on 2nd and 1. Just a awful result here for the most part, and Dennis Gardeck at least makes him pay with the Cardinals taking over. And I think that's really, Marcos, what we're going to be looking for in this game against Jared Goff is, can the Arizona Cardinals force some of these sort of mistakes by getting a lead early, putting Jared Goff back into some of these passing down situations, and then holding on to the ball so long that you're able to kind of make some plays and maybe force a turnover. That's, I think, the key to success in this Cardinals game.
Yeah. As you mentioned, the last play, he held on to the ball too long. That's a Matthew Stafford situation. He does not like taking the underneath passes. He likes to sling it downfield. And at that point, they were losing by the amount that they were losing by. He knew that like checkdowns aren't going to get him there, but still, like in that situation, you want to take something over not taking anything. So for us to be able to win this game, yes, we have to get up, early and stuff. We did it against the Bills. But when we did it against the Bills, not only did they have the last, possession of the drive, they had the first possession coming back. So if we need to defer the ball, put our defense out there, we have to get some sort of a stop against these Lions. I don't want to see another situation where Jared Goff is just beating us with those throws to basically the intermediate middle. That's where he kind of lives by, but he can also throw them outside the numbers now. That's what the confidence has been given to him with the past success and with the head coach knowing that, look, you have the arm to be able to do it. So like, just, you were given up by the last coach for a reason, for his reasons, but not the reason why we're going to have this type of team be successful behind your arm. So now he's gotten the confidence of being able to throw to the outside as well. Jared Goff has owned this Cardinals team. He's owned them ever since we beat him back in, like, I believe it's like 2017 or 2016. It was like he was a rookie and whatnot. We put a beat down on him, but like since Sean McVay has been in the building, Jared Goff has been unstoppable. He's been unstoppable against the Cardinals, and I don't want to see another year of this. And yes, Vance Joseph is not our defensive coordinator anymore, but there's some tendencies that that this defense has given where Jared Goff can eat and he can feast. So let's not have another year where Jared Goff just owns us. We see him once a year. Let's do what we did to the LA Rams. We beat them in improbable situations. Now we need to beat Jared Goff in an improbable situation that we're underdogs in.
Yeah, absolutely. Just as far as for some context for those at least listening and maybe newer fans, maybe don't remember that Jared Goff game. That was the David Johnson gets injured in the final game of the 2016 season. That was why I think Jeff Fisher had been fired already by that point. I was corrected on that I think I'd said that was Jeff Fisher's last game. John Gambador was like, no. Like, he had been fired by then. This was like the the interim head coach. After that game, we had 120 yards of offense. It was sacked like I think it was around 7 times. Yeah, that's a lot of times to be sacked in one game. Like he just got obliterated. He's averaged probably about 71% of his passing yardage or completions, about 270 yards with about 1.5 touchdowns a game. And he's thrown only 3 picks against the Cardinals, hasn't thrown an interception against them since 2018. He's instead thrown for 18 touchdowns against them. So, Marcos, what we're talking about here is Cardinals really had struggled to beat the Rams under Sean McVay for years, including some of those years where Jared Goff was their quarterback. He moves to the Lions. The Lions at least still have been beating him. He's actually only played, I think, the Cardinals one time when the Lions were back there. And this was that 2021 opener in which Arizona was like, all right, we're off to a great start. This is going to be a lot of fun. And at the end of the game that season, he ended up actually still coming away with a hard fought win. Despite taking 4 sacks. I think the biggest, we've like, I think this is something fans have even said about too. We lose to Jared Goff. He just is able to take those checkdowns, take those like quick, easy hits against an aggressive Cardinals defense that we've had. And we just have not been good with blue cat teams. Like we haven't beaten the Lions since like 2000 and I want to say 15. We have not beaten the Jared Goff since 2016. Now, Cardinals were finally able to beat the Rams at home. This is another one of those, like, kind of being able to overcome a team that you just have not beaten for Arizona. And you want to see, I think, that box checked if you are a Cardinals fan. It just is going to be difficult, I think, Marcos, coming in, where I think that if you got a third string tackle coming in, you got Aiden Hutchinson, you have to be realistic and say, hey, if the Cardinals can go into this game and keep it close, not even like go out and win the game or blow them out, but keep it close, that would at least be good for Arizona this year because you're going to be in such a negative situation for Kyler Murray that you don't want to have like a bunch of sacks or injuries. You want to make sure that you can at least go in and prove that, hey, we may be down bodies. It's a next man up philosophy, and we were able to stand toe to toe with the Lions no matter what the outcome would be.
Yeah, and another thing about that 2021 loss to the Lions, did you know that they just won their first game of the season the week before that? They beat the Minnesota Vikings, and the Vikings were just being like memed on. They were being trounced. They were being made fun of because that Lions team was. It was obviously the first year that they had Jared Goff, and we were like pulling for the Lions because like everybody loves their head coach, but also they were like. They're the lovable like losers. Like, come on, man. Like, come on, get your first win of the season. They face off against the Minnesota Vikings. It was on the last it was on one of those throws that was with no time left, and Jared Goff completes it and gets I believe either a 2-point converted or a touchdown. I'm not 100% sure. So for a whole week, the Minnesota Vikings were in the dumps. Now the Cardinals at this point, I think their record was like 10-1, 10-2 or whatnot. We were looking like we were just going to run away with the NFC West. That was the, half a year, the Kyler Murray MVP season. And the defense, despite their issues with the run, at least they were very opportunistic, very blitz heavy and whatnot. Well, this same defense with that same mentality really failed us that game. And I've mentioned it so many times before. Mm-hmm. That defense is the reason why we lost that game because we just were overly aggressive, and Jared Goff loves, being able to pick off zones. When you have more bodies blitzing you, you have less bodies in coverage. So he just kept picking us off. Got the first win of their second win of their season. They beat us 31 to 10. Embarrassing loss. Like I was never that embarrassed for the Cardinals. And guess what? Now we were in the dumps. So these guys, I don't take them lightly for anything. I don't care that they were in the NFC West game last year and they had a really good chance of being able to beat the 49ers. They actually did have them on the ropes. I don't care about that. We just started a new season, and I don't think that this Cardinals team is the same Cardinals team as last year. I think this is a team that could probably be on par. We'll see if that happens, though.
Yeah, it was like you said, a late December game against the Lions in 2021 was the last time Arizona played them. It's also one of the last times the Lions were not as good. Like we were able to at least see them. What's very funny also is like the Lions were the first team that Kyler Murray did play in the NFL. Like that was the game where it was at home, like this game was. Lions got up to a big lead early. It was like 24-6 in the fourth quarter at one point. Cardinals came back and were able to get to a tie after overtime where there was red zone issues where the Cardinals probably should have been able to win that game. Instead, they had to kick some field goals and the game ended without a winner. Back in 2019, since then, the Lions were able to get the win back in the 2020 season on a field goal. They were able to, I think it was the game that probably ended Steve Wilkes' tenure as the Cardinals coach, because Arizona had just gone to the Packers, gotten that surprise win with Josh Rosen, that defense that got Mike McCarthy fired, going, okay, like Steve Wilkes can turn it around a little bit. Let's see what happens. You've got a terrible coordinator / coach in Matt Patricia, who just would lose about 3 times as often as he would win when he was a head coach with the Lions. We saw last year where Kyler Murray and the Cardinals offense were essentially just running the ball down the Eagles' throats in that second half, scoring to just put the game away in Philly for Jonathan Gannon. This is one of those hills in which you want to try to be able to overcome it, but also it's recognizing that this is no longer an embarrassing team to lose to. Like the Matt Patricia loss was embarrassing. Having the chance to win the game against the Lions, despite a couple of missed up opportunities from them in 2019, was embarrassing. You had an embarrassing loss in 2021. This is a team that at least is more on the rise. And I think, Marcos, if we're going to talk about how you're going to beat the Rams specifically, to me, it starts with recognizing that Jared Goff, despite the new team, despite some of the weapons, to some degree, there is still the Jared Goff is Jared Goff. As far as if you're able to get pressure on him up the middle. So first game of the season, this is the Rams defense back when they're a little bit healthier, especially on the offensive side. You had no Puka Nacua, but you still had Cooper Kupp making catches. Rams at least just run a simple stunt here on this spot. Jared Goff is standing in the pocket. It's a good play, but he ends up throwing the ball right over the middle of the field toward Amon-Ra St. Brown. And this is just partially a good play by the defender reading Jared Goff's eyes, but also it's about Goff needing to just kind of jam that ball in there against the coverage, the zone coverage that the Rams are running there. When we look at it from the end zone view, you can only see that there's a stunt that's being run. Like there's not necessarily a huge amount of pressure, but there is a guy who's coming unblocked. So Goff is like, you got to get rid of that ball. He throws the ball, and you can see that the defensive player, at least, he's trying to hit that soft spot in the zone coverage. If he throws a little bit more inside onto his chest, maybe you don't want to throw the ball behind him. But in this case, the linebackers in coverage just takes the ball away from Amon-Ra St. Brown, just is able to make a nice play off the ball, gets a turnover that takes points off of the board. And then out of those sacks that were there in the Buccaneers game, Lions put up a ton of offense. The Lions also had 2 interceptions from Jared Goff, and those ended up being the key for the Bucs being able to sneak out with a win. And what's interesting, I think we went up over this pre-game, Marcos, the way that the Buccaneers got some of that pressure on Jared Goff was right up the middle of the field. So the first play, Goff at least is going to the outside. They got Jahmyr Gibbs lined up outside. You've got Jameson Williams lined up underneath. He gets bumped off of his route with a physical play. Now, could you say and call that illegal contact downfield? Maybe. It was not necessarily called. The way that it's lining up here is he's got essentially like 2 over routes. You get to pick which one that's there. And when you take a look at it on the actual end zone replay, it's not even necessarily that, like, sure, the guy got a little bumped off his route, but Goff just sails the ball over his head. It's just not an accurate throw, and the defensive back can make a play.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we just saw right here, like he likes to attack that middle part of the field or close to the middle between the numbers is what they usually call it. So he's looking at those dig routes, and that was a second instance where he is trying to fit it into a wide receiver that's running a backside, that's running a dig essentially in the intermediate / deep area. You have pretty much the same concept with Amon-Ra St. Brown running about 15 yards up the field and then turn it to the inside, ending up somewhere a little bit below the logo. That would have been where he probably should have gone if he's going to attack the middle. He's trying to fit this ball like it's like
it's a middle. What we think we talked about was this is a middle of the field close sort of look, and the pressure that Vita Vea gets on him because he beats Ragnow right up the front. This is where you would love to have had a Darius Robinson or something. And so there's pressure that's right in his face. Goff at least throws the ball before he can get hit. and it's a high throw over the middle of the field, trying to be able to hit Williams, and there's two guys in coverage. It's a ball that should not be thrown. Like, if you're going to be in that position, and this is just kind of where the NFL works, I would much rather be able to kind of throw it at the feet, if you can, of the guy in front of you, who's 10 yards down the field for the most part. If you need to, maybe you throw a little bit low, but sometimes you're like, yeah, I can fit that and gun it in there. And we've seen with the zone coverages for Goff, that ball kind of floats a little bit. So that's one of the areas, at least, of there can be trust you have in your receiver to make a play, but there's times where we've seen this happen a lot with Jared Goff, where there's under pressure in the middle. The biggest thing, as far as if you say, hey, what could he have done? Well, you've got a guy who's blitzing off of the corner here. There's rushing 5. I think that blitzing one extra player, rushing 5 is the way to go. And Goff is not going to be a running quarterback. So here, even there wasn't a good spot for him to kind of take off like a Kyler Murray could. I think that making him step back, drop, getting pressure on him maybe every once in a while. Now, when the Cardinals would usually blitz him before, you would see that they would get pressure on Jared Goff, but he would hit those checkdowns, hit those short yardage routes. I think you're going to have to be able to find the blitzes, at least, that he's not going to see, and then still have good coverage on the back end. It's hard to be able to pull off, but this is where I think Nick Rallis is paid to be able to do.
I would try to bait him like on those over the middle throws. I would show too high, and then keep like a little robber underneath. Usually that's like a cover one hole. No, not cover one hole. It's a situation where you have like the linebacker. Check it out. Look, he's once again throwing over the middle right here. He's got like what looks like cover 3.
Pressure in his face.
Yeah, this is a cover 3 look, and he just look. This is one of those situations where you have no clue where he was actually trying to target, because if just play it until like the wide receivers get to the top of the routes right here. So I'm trying to look over here where he was actually trying to target, as far as like what wide receiver where he was wanted to go. Nobody has their backs turned. I mean, the only one that has his he's turned to the ball is, I believe, his number 0, which is Jameson Williams, or I'm not sure if that's him or not.
Yeah, Williams is just doing a stick route. That's happening, but what's happening in this that I think is interesting.
Yeah. So he's up the seam, turn looking for the ball, and there's a linebacker underneath him that's already kind of baiting him on that. This is I don't even know where he's trying to go with that.
Yeah. So what we talked about this in the pre-snap was, this seems like a read where I would say all facets of it's kind of like a total kind of failure. So in this spot, he's reading those two guys on the left-hand side of the screen, trying to probably go to a Sam Laporta. Obviously, you've got like a long way to go. This is like got to be a long look, at least, because when you're looking at the yardage total, at least here, this is a 2nd and 16. So you're already saying, hey, there's a penalty that you had on the first drive. Maybe there was a run play that went for a loss. So this is one of those times where it's a defense is down. You're back behind the sticks. What they do in this play, and I think this is where there's 3 sorts of failures. The first one is very clearly up the middle. Frank Ragnow gets the snap off. And you can see, at least, that what they do is they blitz a linebacker up the middle, but they have middle of the field closed with this cover 3 sort of look. There's really not a good place to go with the ball, and the pressure that happens gets very quickly as it's picked up by Gibbs. He gets shoved back. There's more pressure on Goff. He basically pulls the ball down. Instead of going outside to Laporta, I think that he makes a mistake. Ball's supposed to be out. He can't seem to get it to Williams because of that pressure. So he comes back, and it looks like he's expecting Tim Patrick to take the inside route. That safety's got his hips flipped to the outside. That should be one of those plays, and where if Tim Patrick cuts his route there, he's there. Now, if I'm Tim Patrick, I'm looking at this and saying, I'm reading cover 3. What I see is I can't go to middle of the field closed. I'm going to keep going and extending my route to get open on the outside on the back end, because then at least I can either open it up for Amon-Ra St. Brown underneath, or I'll be able to get into a position where I'm not having to go and lead it into the safety. If he goes in toward the safety and Goff throws that, it's kind of a hospital ball there, because over the middle of the field with the middle of the field closed, that's where you get that pow type of hits. That's the same sort of hit that David Johnson took in that 2017 game against the Lions that fractured his wrist and ended up essentially ending his season. So that's where I think it's a failure on that spot by Goff. So it's a failure by the protection. Goff throws it at least, and then the guy goes outside. Maybe you can say he should have come back inside, reading it right. I think that Goff read it wrong, and I think you can say that Patrick should probably be on the same page with his quarterback. Seems like that whatever the case is, they have a whole set of different reads. Jameson Williams coming to the middle. That's just a ball that you should not throw. if you're Jared Goff, take the sack. You know it's going to be 3rd and long. You're still at least in field goal range. You got a chance to run the ball, to kick the ball, get some points. Instead, he turns it over to that safety. There is literally no Lions play around him. It's just 4 Tampa Bay defensive backs. That's one of those plays where we've seen this before from Jared Goff. And if the Cardinals are going to win, Marcos, that's the sort of play that they're going to need to do in order to be able to force a turnover, take the ball away from that Lions rushing attack, and give it to Kyler Murray and the Cardinals in establishing the run on their end. All right, and we got one more good look at least for that, but yeah, just kind of tosses it up, and it is just taken away by the Buccaneers. Buccaneers do come away and win this game. And with that, Marcos, let's go and shift into our score predictions now. So for the score predictions for the game, we did mention at the top of the show, the over-under is about 51.5 points. So if you're looking at that, that's about or so. If you're saying, hey, I'm going to take the over, I think more points are scored, that'd be about a 28-24 game. You're talking about 52 points total. That's about 7 touchdowns scored. The question then is it the Cardinals who kind of are at the top of that game? Is it the Lions? I think that I also am looking at this as the over. There's been enough issues, at least here, where I think that Jared Goff has not played as well. I think we could see a turnover that could benefit the Cardinals. I think that we've also seen that Arizona's offense has been pretty potent for the most part. Even with going down to Kelvin Beachum, we'll have to see if their offense gets completely fractured. But I have to think, Marcos, that the Cardinals are going to come out. They're going to run the ball pretty well. I think that they'll be able to get some points on the board. I think that when it comes to who's playing best, you'd like to say that Kyler's playing some of the best ball of his career through 2 weeks. I think that gives you an edge ahead of a Jared Goff, but it just makes me feel nervous that there could be something that's not Kyler's fault, like a fumble or something that happens from an Aiden Hutchinson blowing up a play. I think that this ends up being a game where it ends up having a final score of 27-24. I think that it hits the under. Most people are picking the over. I think this game goes a little bit under that points total. And I think that at 27-24, that the Lions would then at least be there within that 3-point spread, where I think it kind of comes down to Cardinals are able to tie the game a little bit late with maybe a nice Murray run, or maybe you're able to force a play. I think at the end of the day, unless you're managing the clock where you get the ball, I think the Lions will get the ball. They'll be able to kind of have a play or two that gets set up. Cardinals defense has not been good at stopping guys at the end of quarters. They've not been good at stopping guys at the end of games as far as those 2-minute drills. And I think the Lions would kick a field goal to kind of get out of Arizona with a close win. What's your prediction for the game? And are there any players that you could like or expect to have a big game?
Well, depending on who's at right tackle, I would expect Aiden Hutchinson on the opposite side to have a impactful game. This is going to be a situation where it's not going to be easy to be able to block up like that part of the line, because it's not just Aiden Hutchinson. I believe there are some other notable players on their line. So keeping that pressure off, let's not go into the situation where we're throwing quick again. Let's try to rumble with what we have. So I hope there's more under center situations where like you're gonna have Kyler Murray out in the open, because it works so well against the Lions. That let's be real, that him being free from the pocket and being mobile from the pocket, it actually did help him out, which is something that we should have been doing all along and stuff. I think that's where his strengths come from. And let's see what we can do as far as like these deep shots to like Marvin Harrison, but you can also do into Trey McBride. You can also do into Michael Wilson. You have a slew of wide receivers that are just not, and also Greg Dortch can also contribute in that passing attack. So let's do that and continue doing what we're doing with James Conner.
He is on the injury report. If he doesn't play, that'll be something that happens. But from what I've heard, at least, the expectation is to play, and I'm with you. If I had to pick one player to have a big game in here, I think a Trey McBride game would be huge. Alex Anzalone is banged up. I think that if you're looking at Terry and Arnold playing, and you've got that coverage at least that's able to be played, where if teams do play more of the back routes, don't want to let Marvin get behind them again, maybe you can't even have one of those games where Marvin gets behind because you just don't have the ability with Aiden Hutchinson and a 3rd-round offensive tackle. that means Trey McBride's going to have to come up huge, whether it's off of bootlegs, off of being able to run the ball, being in those short yardage things, breaking tackles. I think that he could have in this one probably an 80-yard game and get into the end zone is what I think you would hope for, and that's what I'll predict for this as we wrap up our show today. Thank you guys so much for listening to our show. We love having people who are able to follow us on our YouTube channel with our breakdowns, as well as following us on our respective Twitter accounts. Marcos, if you want to go ahead as we sign off and let our listeners know where they can find you and your content.
You can find me on X and obviously a former Twitter at Pancake Soul. Like I said, I'm always available. You guys have any questions? I do clips and breakdowns here and there and stuff. And like I said, you can also find us here at the Redbird. At the Redbird Reboot Podcast. I was gonna say something different, but that's not the podcast anymore. All right, Redbird Reboot. Find us here.
Absolutely. And of course, as always, I'm Blake Murphy7. Hey, that's our show for today, guys. Cardinals fans, you've been rebooted. That means it's time for us to log off. Thanks again, everyone. Go Cardinals. We'll see you on the other side of Detroit versus Arizona.
See you guys.